Before I can turn these two 40-foot shipping containers into a boat shed to house my rotting wooden sailboat, I have to get them leveled and squared up to each other. I started by laying out some string lines that I could take measurements off of. The first line I eyeballed along the back edge of the slate pad that the excavator put in. Unfortunately, the corner stakes were removed in the process, so I had to re-establish some reference lines, and the back edge was the clearest. I'm using something called perpendicular bisectors to lay out the second line at exactly 90 degrees. The basic process goes like this. Lay out your first line, pound a stake where you want your second line to intersect. On either side of that stake, being sure to reference from the same edge, measure out equal distances and drive two more stakes. The farther apart these are, the more accurate this will be. Off of one of the stakes, use a string and chalk or paint to strike an arc on both sides of the first line, then repeat the process on the other stake using the same length of string. If everything was done right, once you draw a line through the two intersecting arcs, you should have two perfectly perpendicular layout lines. June 30th. The next morning, I started measuring how far the containers were from the line, and then got ready to start moving them. Right now, they don't slide very well since they're sitting on wooden 4x4s, and they're 8,600 pounds each. My friend Bill, the one who pulled the transmission out of the boat with his crane truck, loaned me a couple lengths of guardrail to put under the containers so that they would slide around easier. Metal slides around a lot better on metal than it does wood. Once I had the back end of the first container on the guardrail, I anchored the front end to my truck so that it wouldn't pivot and then started pulling with a come-along. I had to move the entire container over almost 2 feet, so it was a slow and steady sort of job. Once I had the front end of the container on the guardrail, I thought I would try a different method. With my truck in 4-wheel drive and in low range, it worked great pulling the container over. A bit too great actually. I overshot it by a decent amount and had to push it back into place. After a few more back and forth maneuvers, I had the first container parallel with my layout lines. It's been pretty hot recently, so I took the puppies to the beach to cool off and to start getting them used to the water. It's crazy to see how fast they're already growing. Girl, man. Good girl. That's so good. July 1st. In hindsight, I probably should have done this first, but now I needed to push the left container backwards so that it was the same distance from the back edge of the pad as the right container. I marked out some 1/4-inch lines on the guardrail so that I would know if I slid it to the side during the process, and then got the truck lined up to do some more work. Unfortunately, I overshot it again, so I hooked some straps to the frame and pulled it back until it was in the right spot. Luckily, it didn't move laterally, so I could give the truck a bit of a break, for now. Next, I had to check that the container was level, which it should be since the pad is supposed to be leveled. It was slightly off, but that's because it was still sitting on the guardrails, so I took them out and replaced them with the 4x4s that I had cut to the width of the container. With that, I had one container in its final position, parallel with the layout lines and level front to back and side to side. Since the containers themselves are pretty much perfectly rectangular, I was able to use the left one as a reference to take measurements off of to get the right into position, so I took the string line out.
Just 1 inch. Have to move it that way.
Luckily, I only had to move the back of the right container an inch outward, so I brought the truck around and started clearing a bit of the lower branches of some of the trees to give me enough clearance. July 2nd. After a bit more chainsaw work, I finished the clearing and got the truck lined up to pull the container over. Before I started pulling, I made a mark on one of the 4x4s where I wanted the edge of the container to end up. Then, I very slightly lifted the end with my bottle jack, just enough to take the weight off, and pulled it over with the truck, landing exactly where I wanted it to go. July 3rd. As I was checking the level of the right container, I noticed it was off slightly, but I'm pretty sure I know why. Chad loaned me his heavy-duty floor jack, and it made quick work of lifting the front end of the container so that I could cut and place the 4x4s in their final position.
I swear these ants are haunting me.
After that was done, I checked the level and everything looked good, which makes 2 containers parallel and level. All that was left was one more thing to check, but first I needed to turn my truck into a rolling scaffold. I have to say, I really love the ladder rack on the truck. It's part of what sold me on it, that and the snowplow, but it's been so useful for carrying long things like lumber. After loading up some 2x6s and strapping them down, I had a 5-foot by 16-foot platform that I could put anywhere between the containers. I'm definitely going to be using this when it comes time to frame the roof. Then I took a couple of 2x6x10s, screwed on 2x4 reinforcements, and screwed one end of each board to the truck platform to create a sort of catwalk between the 2 containers. Once I could easily travel between the containers, I clamped some temporary blocks at the corners to act as reference marks, since the corners are too rounded to hook on the end of a tape measure, and used my 100-foot tape measure to check that the containers are square by measuring corner to corner. If the two corner-to-corner measurements are the same, then I know it's perfectly square. In this case, it looks like I'm off by half an inch, but over a span this large, I'm willing to accept that margin of error. I can also finagle it with the framing, but if I have to make adjustments to the containers themselves, I will. And that's it. The foundation of the new boat shed is in place, and I'm ready to start attaching wood to the containers. Next, I'll anchor some 2x4s to the tops of them so that I have something to fasten the framing to, which means it's time to learn a new skill that I've been meaning to learn for a long time.